As was mentioned here at the Independence Reformed Bible Church, we do allow for questions. And so I'll come back around the front here. I believe my mic is working. And thank you guys for doing a great job with that this morning. Fantastic job. We ask that you raise your hand and we'll have, there's a mic set up there right in the middle. Thank you. Hard to see. It's like right there in the middle. So if anybody has a question, you can step up to the mic and ask. Hi.
I've heard so much about there's no real godly candidates for the vote. I just can't agree with that. And so what's your opinion on Christians not voting?
Yeah, there are some strains of Christianity where they feel it's since this is a wicked system, that you're actually promoting the wickedness of the system by going into that voting booth and cooperating with them. That's some of our more reformed folks, or some of our reformed folks that believe that. I do see voting in the scriptures in a very local level. The way I see government in the Bible, we didn't have time to talk about this today, but the way I see government in the scriptures is intensely local. All the important decisions were made very close to where people lived. They're made at the gates. The more remote decisions were made at the top level. So what happens is that the day-to-day decisions, the decisions that affected directly were made very close to you, and the foreign policy decisions, if you will, were made far away from you. We actually even see that in our own history here. Initially, the president was seen as a person who directed foreign policy, because you can't really direct that so well at the local level. But I cannot see the idea. I can't see the idea that you're not supposed to vote because there's wicked people involved. There's wicked people running. What's to say that you can't go in that voting booth and vote for, even if it's the only vote in the world, a righteous and godly man? Just because there's wicked people all over the place doesn't mean that you can't go do that. And I don't see the point myself of saying, well, no, I'm not going to vote today. I'm just not going to do it because it's wicked people running things. There's all kinds of wickedness going on, and even Paul said that if we could separate ourselves from all wickedness, we'd have to go out of the world, which we can't do and we're not supposed to do. So that's a really brief view on that. A lot more that could be said on that. Who else has a question on this very controversial topic at this controversial season? Yes. Okay. Well, yeah.
I'm part of the electoral college for the President of the United States. And I think the gentleman should go in control because he says in terms of options. We'll do that.
Sure. Be glad to. My favorite question. Only took 2 questions to get there. Yeah. My argument this morning is that we have given up on the idea of a providential God. That's my argument here today. Think what God did providentially for his people who loved him. For example, Hezekiah surrounded by the Assyrians. Surrounded. He prays to God. The next morning, it's funny the way the Bible says it. The Assyrians wake up and it says, and behold, they were all dead. Now that's kind of a humorous way. I mean, I don't know how you wake up when you're dead, but that's actually what it says. It's a humorous way of saying it. God providentially moved and saved these people. God providentially moved and saved Jehoshaphat. We didn't read it this morning. And my friends, I'm just trying to explain to you the scriptures here. That's what I'm doing. We didn't read it, but Jehoshaphat, after he prays, a prophet comes to him and says, you know what? You're going to go down there, and you aren't even going to do anything. They're going to go destroy each other. Now, who would have thought that? You see, if we were pragmatists, not principled, we would say, Jehoshaphat, you got to get out there. Don't waste your time praying. You got these people coming to destroy you. You got to go do something. He first appeals to God, then he obeys what the prophet said. He believed in a providential God. The idea of providence, I would argue, is pretty much gone from our Christian discourse today. We don't believe in it anymore. My friends, we've been told this election cycle, if I can say it, here we go, we're going to be right in the middle of it. By the way, we're not a 501c3 church, so we can say these kinds of things. The mantra that has been presented to the Christian community, we have an open mic. If you don't like what I'm about to say, I'll listen to you. I promise I'll listen to you. From what I'm about to say, the Christian community has been told this election cycle, don't fear God, fear Hillary. No one's voting for anybody this election cycle. No one's voting for anyone. We're voting against people. That's what we're doing this election cycle. I do fear Hillary. She is Jezebel in the flesh. But what is my responsibility before God to fear him in that voting booth? That's the question we all must answer here. Yes?
Thank you so much that you allowed us these questions. I respect that so much. When I look at the moral character of our two candidates, to me they just seem so equivalent. It's corruption, 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 crazy. They seem more like brother and sister to me than anything. And I just wonder, again, how much, I use Trump as an example, because he seems to be taking this more biblical or pro-life platform. And how much of that is just to draw votes? You've got to, have some kind of difference to vote for. If he had been in the fight for pro-life prior to the election, been in the fight for religious liberty, then you've got a track record. But thinking from a business perspective, with no track record, why would we even trust? So I just wondered if you would, is there really that much of a difference? We're presented that there's two very different radical worldviews, but I really wonder, is it really kind of the same, that they're trying to get us to all be involved? And then the second question I have, I know Trump has a quote, spiritual advisory team. Mm-hmm. If the Trump campaign had called you to be part of the spiritual advisory team, what would you have said and why? What would have gone into your thought process?
Sure. Okay, good.
Presented your church has had influence and shaped his thinking. Would you?
Sure. Yeah. Great.
What his motivation would be?
Great question. Let me see if I can answer the first question first, and that is on the character of the people. George Bush was not isn't this fun that we can talk about these things in church? George Bush, the last one, he wasn't a bad guy, right? Would you vote for him again? Do you see who he appears to be voting for? Have you seen that? Hillary. He will not come out and say he's voting for Trump. I conclude from that who he's voting for. I mean, he hasn't actually said it that I know of, but not being Sherlock Holmes, I think I can put two and two together here. Let me ask you this question this morning. I want you to think about these things, my friends. If Hillary was running against Bill, Hillary's a Democrat and Bill's a Republican, do you vote for Bill? Do you? Why not? After all, he's not Hillary. And we can vote for anything that's not Hillary, can't we? Think about these things, my friend. Think about these things. Ask yourself how we got to where we are. We have been voting for the lesser of two evils for all these years, and you know what we've got still to vote for? I think evil. I think. Kind of looks that way. As far as Trump is concerned, he has done some gutsy things. And that's part of his support, I think. He has stood up and he's fought, and the Republican establishment is looking for someone who will fight for so long, and just all they've done is sent Republican after Republican to Congress to bend over and take whatever the Democrats give them. If I can use so crass an illustration, which that was crass, excuse me for that. But that's just the way it's been. And here's a guy who's actually appears to be fighting them. He said things that no other Republican running for office that I've ever heard has said. He has said, for example, it's time to get rid of the Johnson Amendment, which started the whole 501c3 nonsense years ago. Trump has stood up and said those kinds of things. And it's like, and you're sitting back and you're saying, man, no one's ever said this. I think I like this guy. The problem is, like you said, we just don't know. We just don't know.
Motivation? Is it just to suck us in and make us all flock to him, or is it really sincerely making a difference?
I just would like to have seen from him a record. And that is the first thing that Jethro said to Moses in Exodus 18. Able men. How do you know someone's able? It's only one way. A record. Right? Would Donald Trump qualify that? He's a businessman, of course. But what about his ability here in terms of what is godly and was right and was true as immoral? You know who had ability? Was King Ahab. That was a man of some serious ability. He knew how to build up a kingdom. But he did evil in the sight of the Lord. And that was the number one disqualification for him. Now, as far as your second question, what would I have said? If they said, hey, yeah, why don't you, we want you to be in the advisory team. First thing I would do, I would say, okay, first thing, no public photo ops. None. Because they constantly use those kinds of things. See, this guy, we got this picture with him. He's our guy. No public photo ops. The only discussions we're going to have are between you and I, and I'm going to see what you're going to do about it. Otherwise, I don't want to be part of your team at all. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Exodus 18, and we're going to find out, Mr. Trump, or whoever I'm talking to, we're going to find out what you think about the fear of the Lord. Because we have a Bible that says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I love how we do this in our churches all the time. Give President Obama wisdom. If President Obama doesn't have the fear of the Lord, he's not going to get wisdom. But we have these happy prayers, and they sound so pious. Oh, give him wisdom. President Obama doesn't care about wisdom. He hates wisdom. Now, praying for the fear of the Lord. Now we're getting somewhere. So, Mr. Whoever you are, do you fear God? Do you understand that standing before God one day is going to be a lot more scary than standing in front of 100 million of the American electorate who don't like you? Do you get that? Because if you don't get that, you're not qualified to be dog catcher. That's where I'd start. Not where I finish, but that's where I start. Yeah, that might be where I finish. We do not need you. We have other advisors. As Ahab had 400 advisors as well, right? He had his 400 court prophets. Told him what he wanted to hear.
Thank you for your messages. I just have a bit of a confusion here.
Sure.
Personally, I'm one that stands for less government, more personal responsibility. Obviously, God's providence in this whole matter. We mentioned about securing the blessings of liberty for our posterity. And talk about dispensing justice.
Yeah.
There is one candidate that absolutely has injustice, and there's one that has justice. Obviously, it's not perfect justice that we're looking for. I don't know of any candidate historically, save George Washington perhaps, or some of the other founders that would have met any of this criteria.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
We had hoped for Jimmy Carter. We saw what was up for Jimmy Carter after was going to be a brilliant Christian and
Sure.
the legacy that he left.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm looking at all of this news that's coming out. We go to the police department, we're ready to issue indictments based upon the Anthony Weiner,
Yeah.
scandal that's actually implicating The depravity that is in those emails is so great that it just cannot be ignored. We're talking about just pay to play.
Yeah.
We're talking about pedophilia. Things that are going on that we thought was going on, never could prove it, but now we know. Obviously, both candidates are imperfect, but there is definitely a lesser of two evils here. And the party platform for Hillary Clinton does not include God at all. Will continue Planned Parenthood. And God help us, what other havoc mischief would be caused through the Supreme Court of the United States if things change that way. To somebody that she might nominate and that the Senate, the willing Senate and the willing House would approve. So, it's really not asking a question here. It's more like stating, this is how I'm seeing this. I wish to God that we had better choices. They're both imperfect, but one is so imperfect that it makes the other one so obvious. And
Yeah, like what? Yeah, like what?
at this point, I'll just have to leave it at that.
No, yeah, what to do? Yeah, what do we do about this? We've got John Bingaman shared with me a cartoon recently that says it all. You know, here if you've been at this church, you know I'm jealous of people who can do these kinds of things, write cartoons like this, because they can say in one little picture, one little sketch, what it takes me all day to say. And in this particular cartoon, it's, what was it, the election, something like that? American Roulette, that was it, right? And there's two guns on the table. One gun is named Hillary, and one gun is named Trump. And you can see inside the chamber, it's a revolver, a six-shooter, and the gun named Hillary has all six chambers loaded, right? And the gun named Trump has 3 of the 6 loaded. Yeah. Yeah. We say, well, we pick up the Hillary gun and we know we're dead. Pick up the Trump gun, maybe we have a fighting chance. It's kind of the way we feel about this. My position has been, even before I was a pastor, that I can only, when going into that voting booth, I'm actually choosing. And I don't see in the scriptures anywhere where I have the opportunity to choose anything but a God-fearing person, a God-fearing man. However, here's a qualifier. I have supported, I'll say it this way, I have supported men who I believe are Christian men. I believe they fear God to an extent, but they're not willing to do the one thing that I believe has to be done, and that is separate the school from the state. Defund that colossal anti-Christ system that no matter, my friends, no matter what battle we win today, no matter, we can win battles today, and we have won some, but if the people who hate God still own the next generation, whatever victory we win today, we're going to lose it later on. And so none of the people even that I've supported that I believe are Christians have even stood on that platform. But I've supported them anyway. So I can't give you a ironclad, let me say, argument, but I can say that I know from scriptures, the scriptures, as I understand the scriptures, as I understand them, everything you said being true, Bob, everything being true. I'm even going to go a little further than that. I'm going to tell a story that happened to me when I was just out of Bible college. It has to do with this pedophilia. This happened to me. I went to school, and we'll get to you, Chester. Just hang in there. I went to school in Washington, in the Washington D.C. area myself. I was always interested in politics. And, you know, I remember Nixon resigning, the whole thing, and all that stuff. I remember asking my dad how much $250 billion is, because that was the national debt. Wow. And so I was interested in that. After I got out of Bible college, I wanted a job on Capitol Hill. We lived in, you know, in Southern Maryland, and on Thursdays I had my day off. I sold shoes down on K Street in Washington D.C., and I would go pound the pavement on Thursdays and knock on the doors to see if I could get a job on Capitol Hill. And I never did get one. One day, a friend of mine, he was an older professor at college there. He invited a friend of his to come and talk to me about this. And we met at his house. And he had been a chief of staff for a congresswoman named Lindsey Boggs, who was a congresswoman at that time from Louisiana. I'll never forget, his name was David Hemmerly. And he sat down and tried to talk this starry-eyed kid out of coming up to Capitol Hill. He asked me a few questions, and then he kind of laid it down for me. And understand, he did not make distinctions in what he said, party distinctions in what he said. Okay, please understand that. He said, look, he said, I deal with lobbyists. He said, I need to tell you how it is up here. You need to know what goes on up here. He said, I deal with lobbyists. And I've asked lobbyists how they get done what they get done up here. You see, we think that someone comes in with a good argument, and this is going to be done for the American people. Vote this way because the American people will benefit from this. Not at all. Not at all. Lobbyists just flat out told them, look, here's what I do. Here's how I get done what I get done. Here's how I do it. I give them what they want. And then he started naming it. He said, if they want alcohol, I get them alcohol. If they want drugs, I get them drugs. This was back, my friends, in 1981. Reagan had just been elected and everything's good. He said, if I get them women, I get them women. And if they want men, I get them men. And you know what's coming next. And if they want children, I get them children. I would like to stand up here and say that I just know that that does not apply to both parties. There's no way I can do that. We know what some of these folks are saying. We don't know what they're doing. For my part, every one of us has to go in that voting booth and fear God, first of all. Hillary really is something to fear. If you don't fear that woman, you don't have a pulse. There's a lot of dead people around her, and they're not done dying. She is a wicked woman. Is that on tape? She is, and has been for quite a while. For me, it comes down to who do I fear more, God or Hillary? Chester.
I do 100%. But although my lifetime, I've been faith in Christ since I was about 16 years old, and I heard the changes that came through the church over the years. I remember about 30-some years old when they first started to say God loves everybody, just hates their sin. What a contradiction to the scriptures. God hates the wicked, we thank you for the wicked. We know that from scriptures. And that the righteous have no prayer that they can make to have eternal life. It's all in God's hands. God's what quickens us, gives us the faith to believe the scriptures, and to follow them to the best of our ability. We have the help of the Spirit of God. Now we have, in the last 30 years, we have this idea that we have to choose between two evils, so I won't choose either side. I won't choose Hillary or I won't choose Trump. Well, the only problem with that is that we have, common sense tells us we have one choice. That's Hillary or Trump. It's never ever changed. No more than jumping off the Empire State Building, you can believe that you want to land safely on the ground. We're not the Pentagon. You have to use common sense, which God has given us. And we have left the enemy coming to our churches, telling us that we can't choose Trump because he was evil. Well, I can come back and quote you a lot of scriptures showing how God used wicked men to rule. And then he told us, like Nebuchadnezzar, you children of Israel, you bow down to us Chaldeans and raise families and raise children under this wicked man, because he'll give you a better life than what you had in Jerusalem. You stay there, you're not. And here we have a man, we don't know if he's really a Christian or not.
I think we do know. I really think we do know.
They're saying he's claiming that he believes in God, that he believes, and he's come to his senses. I don't know this. I don't trust in this stuff either. We shouldn't trust in that. We have that told to us over and over, and we've been deceived. But at the same time, we do have a choice. This man says, as a businessman, he says he's going to fight people in the Supreme Court that are pro-life. We need that to live peacefully in this society. Stop God's judgment coming down on us. He also has pointed out many other things he's going to eliminate. As in business myself, I understand that he's going to eliminate a lot of the rules that hinder business.
Okay, Chester, so what's your question?
The question is, are you going to hold up to your word that you told us when we walked in this church that you're going to vote for Trump?
I'm going to look you straight back. I've never said that.
No, he's here to bear witness. Two witnesses.
Well, okay, wait a minute, stop for a second. Has anybody in this church right now ever heard me say, I'm going to vote for Trump? I want you to stand up and say so. I definitely never said that. You guys have been with me for the Mid-Atlantic Reformation Society for all these years. Have you? Just wait a minute. Chester, stop, Chester. You guys that have been with me at the Mid-Atlantic Reformation Society, just stop.
I'm just telling you what you said.
Stop.
Now,
Chester, I never said it. I'm telling you right now, I never said it. Well, you didn't hear me say it, so I'm not calling you a liar. She might have heard wrong. Let me ask you this congregation right now. Have any of you ever even thought that I was considering voting for Trump? Any of you? No. You heard wrong.
well, I heard wrong, but basically, it came out of your mouth. No. But at the same time, no, okay, you weren't there. It was early in the morning. We walked in and we asked, you said it. I mean, he said it jokingly off the cuff, but I took it to your mouth, okay? Now, personally, I could not feel like I'm here with a lot of people that are mentally, something's wrong. If you can't see what you're doing, I think they'll have you work for business for you. I would never trust you to feed pigs.
Okay, Chester, we're done now. Chester, we're done.
It's a problem you folks have.
We're done.
You better wake up.
We're done, Chester. We're done.
I know it wasn't going to go over.
We're done. Hey, you know what?
Like it or not, you use the word for me, the blabbing things you said about me and my family are disgraceful. You owe an apology to my son also.
You know, this is why we keep politics out of church, is it not? But you know what? It needs to be here. We need to talk about these things. See, what's happening in this, right here is what's happening all throughout the country. And if we as believers cannot talk about these things, we're just busted. Is there anybody else that has a question? Yes.
I think it's interesting to sit back and listen, because what I think many of us do whether intentionally or unintentionally, because we believe that ultimately, even with what you said, Joel, going into the poll, that when we go into that booth, when we vote, we need to honor God there. I think that's part of the issue. I can remember growing up, and I've been through many elections that I've never voted in, but the consequences of each of those has come to bear on me and on my family today. The issue, I believe, when we say things like we must vote according to the lesson of two evils, what we are doing is that we are saying that there are multiple sides and God might bless one of them. I think the issue there is that when we as a church fail to see the repentance of Nineveh as a people group that is not just an outreach program that Jonah did, that was national reform. That was God moving in the leadership of a nation in which people repented and a nation turned to God. Those are the types of beliefs that we need to vote on. Those are the types of things that we need to go into polls and into these booths believing that it is the same God who turned Nineveh, wicked Nineveh, the same God who turned them can turn any nation. This is not just about Hebrew nations or Israelite people. This is about a nation of God-fearing people saying, we are not going to simply go in and play the games of politics and say, we cannot vote for this person, so we must vote here. This person is less wicked than this person. Here's the issue, is we know, we have the scriptures, therefore we know what God's standard is. And if no one whose name appears in that ballot matches with God's standard, then we must vote differently. And I believe that only in doing that, and it will not happen in this generation, but I would ask this, for anybody who would say, well look, we need to keep voting lesser of two evils. I remember growing up in America in which, and I think it still is pretty true today, that the belief is to vote Republican is to vote Christian. I know that my parents taught me that. But the issue is that continually, time and time again, what we see is the votes for Republican, and we do not see godly reform. Sure, we can pick at godly principles as maybe individual candidates. I could point out to you Democrats who have worked on things that are godly on the exterior. The issue is not whether or not they do some things that align with Scripture. The issue is, do these men profess and live out the reality that Christ is King of their life and that Christ is King of all creation? And I would argue that if we would stop and if we would understand that if the church as a whole would not just take that belief into the voting booth, but instead would engage each and every one of their neighbors and challenge them generationally that we must not conform to this idea of choosing evil in any facet, but we must toe the line of righteousness. It will take generations, but I would argue that if you understood that the church stands up and votes righteousness each time and teaches their children to vote righteousness, each time and teaches their children to vote righteousness, each time there will come a day in this country when they will vote according to the law word of God. For anybody who says that's nonsense, I believe every one of you would stand up and say, well, we see the danger of Islam in Europe. Why do you see the danger? Well, because they're having so many children and they're teaching their children and their children's children and their children's 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 children to stand up and to vote for Sharia law. Well, if you see that happening, then how can you say it is impossible that that can happen in this nation? That is the reality. We must stop thinking that we should only be serving God's righteousness in the booth. We must confront our neighbors, and we must be saying to not only this country but the world, Christ is King, and the only law that applies is His law.
Amen. Amen.
If that's the case, then why don't we go for Hillary? You can use her just as much as you can use Trump. I mean, what's the difference? Hillary, Trump, they're both evil. He'll work with what he's got, so question slash.
I actually can't argue with that. I mean, if he can use, God can use anyone, then he can use anyone. Okay, I have one more question, I think, then we'll wrap it up for the questions. Thank you for your participation, by the way.
I just want to say it's not Jesus on the throne, even if Hillary is in there, she's here and here God.
Yeah. Can't argue with that. I think I have one more. Good. Thank you.
Pastor, if we are to go into these polls and vote on principle, not on pragmatism, it leaves us not comfortable voting for Jezebel on the Democratic ticket, nor Ahab on the Republican ticket. But finding information about them is easy. There's plenty out there. What's not so easy to find is information on other candidates who may very well line up with Christian principle, with actual Christian
Sure.
candidates
Yeah.
who would follow in righteousness.
Sure.
Who are some of those men that we should be looking for as
Sure.
viable Christian options for presidential candidate?
Sure. And you can easily do a Google search, third-party candidates, and find out a lot. Two that you might want to consider, Tom Heffling and Darrell Castle. Unfortunately, neither one of them have the end of public education on their platform, at least that I could see. But you can get information. That leads me, though, to the last point I want to make this morning, and that is we have, there's another doctrine I think we've given up on. We've given up on the doctrine of providence, but we've also given up on the doctrine of interposition. That's what we need to think about, because I'll give you a quick example. I've given this example before. I'll give it again. In Elkhart County, Indiana, a few years ago, the USDA was going to come in and shut down an Amish farmer for the completely offensive crime of selling raw milk, right? And that's why we have, of course, this federal government to save us from people who might sell us raw milk. Aren't we glad about that? A local sheriff stood up, he interposed, and he sent the USDA a letter, and he sent it to a particular person, and he said, if you show up on this man's property without a warrant from a local judge, I or my deputies will place you under arrest. Stood up to the USDA. And guess what happened? Of course, the USDA sent this threatening letter, and they backed down. You see, I get the emphasis on the election. It's important. I would like to see us, as a believing community, as Christians, think more about this doctrine of interposition, wherein a lesser magistrate steps in between that of the upper magistrate and protects the rights and liberties of the people down here. This used to be a doctrine that was very well known. It's not so much well known anymore at all. It's just really not. And I would ask us to consider the local people, your local sheriff, the ones that we forget about, the people whose names we don't even know. What do we know about the people that are closest to us? And I believe that's actually more a scriptural principle, because as stated earlier, in Scripture, the business was done at the gates that affected you. It was very local. See, here's how it goes. I believe in a godly society, the vast majority of the business is done at the very, very local level, and it's very small here at the top. In a godless society, it's all done here at the top, and there's hardly anything decided at the local level. I would ask us all, as we wrap this up, to consider that point, that we haven't given the attention we need to the doctrine, the biblical godly doctrine of interposition. I want to thank you all for your kind attention here this morning, and thank you for coming out to this, for what we've done today. Grateful for every one of you here this morning, and you've given wonderful attention. Thank you very much, John.